Okay, Yevamos Daf Chaf. So we're going to finish off the previous Mishnah by understanding the Rabbanan's opinion, and then we're going to start off a brand new Mishnah. So the Rabbanan, we need to understand a little bit, because they're the ones who say, remember the case of Reuven, Shimon, and Levi? So they say that if Reuven died, and then Levi was born, and then Shimon did Yibum, that explains why Levi is patur from Reuven's wife, because the first time that Levi encountered her, she was in a position of prohibition, and therefore that stays forever. But in a case where Reuven dies, Shimon does Yibum, and then Levi is born, what's the problem? When he's born, she's already permitted to him. So technically it should be fine. So the Rabbanan ultimately say, no, it boils down to a pasuk, which is Ulikacha lo liisha v'yivma, which is in Devarim Chafei, which pretty much means she always retains her, like, a little bit of Yibum status, meaning even when Shimon does Yibum on her, and then even when Shimon does Yibum on her and then he dies, so technically she is even thinking of chalitza, but no matter what, she always retains a little bit of her of that Yibum status, and so when Levi encounters her, she's still in a sort of position of erva, of Isser. So that's pretty much the end of the Mishnah. We have a new Mishnah which covers general principles. It's pretty normal and throughout Shas to jump into a Masechta by discussing the topic, and then only then backtracking and talking about principles, or introducing principles that we had to kind of figure out on our own over the last couple of daf. But the Mishnah says a few things. First of all, it says that anyone who's an erva, the general rule is any erva is pater from yibum chalitza. But if it's an iser mitzvah or it's an iser kedusha, you are pater from yibum, but you should do chalitza. So the Gemara is going to jump in and sort of explain what sort of, the Gemara opens up by saying, what does it mean, Isser Mitzvah? What does it mean, Isser Kedusha? Isser Mitzvah are things like, let's say, it's actually Machlokas in the Gemara, but first of all, we say an Isser Mitzvah are any sort of Araya Shnios. They're additional, other than the 15 that we mentioned in the previous Mishnah and at the beginning of the Masechta. There's still a bunch, and the Gemara is going to explain later, not on today's daf, but at later daf, some examples of what that means. The second thing is in Isur and Kedusha, which means these are Asur just because Kedoshim Tiyu, particularly when it comes to Kohanim, things like Kohanim marrying an Almana or Grusha, but also things like Yisraelim marrying a Nesina or a Mamzeris, so it's sort of like a forbidden union. These are things that are Asur. So the Gemara just says, by the way, what does it mean, Isser Mitzvah? Because there's a mitzvah that says if you listen to Chachamim. So that's why you're sort of, you're violating that. According to that mitzvah, it's Asr. And then same thing with Kedusha, the pasuk says Kedoshim Tiyu. So so that's like you're Asr because you need to be Kadosh. There's some small clarifications about the Mishnah, like when it says Ze'ah Klal, what does it sort of include? It includes, let's say, an example of an islandess who is also someone, the co-wife of a non-erva, who is also exempt from Yibum Chalitza. So it's not just the 15 ervas that are Asr, but it's anyone where there's the Isser of erva. And then the rest of the daf is pretty much discussing one area here, which is a Kohen we know is not allowed to marry an Almana, right? So the Gemara says, if this woman had done Nisuin and then her husband passes away, then the Kohen is also, he's not allowed to do Yibum on her. But if she did Ersin, the Gemara says that if he did, he can do Yibum, but then he has to then basically he has to split up with her afterwards. The question is, why can't a Kohen do Yibum on a widow through Ersin? I understand through Nisuin, there's a concept of there's an aseh and a los aseh, and that pushes off the aseh of yibum, right? But the question is, there is not an aseh when it comes to erison, so a kohen should technically be allowed, the yibum should technically override the prohibition for a kohen to marry an erison. So I wouldn't enunciate that very well. But, so the question is, why can't he? So Rav Gidol quotes Rav, and he says, well, the reason why this is not possible, at least what he wants to say initially, is just because there's this concept of, there's a pasuk that says, "Va'alsa yivimto hashara," which pretty much means that there's a specific type of yivama that's like there's an extra word, yivimto, which teaches us that there is a type of yivama who must always do chalitza. Meaning you're not patur from everything, it's not like you're fully exempt, but you need to do chalitza, and what kind is that? Chayve lavin. If there's a lav, even though the los aseh and the aseh are not enough even though it's just a los aseh, so technically the yibum shouldn't, overpower it, but this designation is required to force you to do chalitza. So that's what Rav Gidol quotes Rav as saying. But then we're basically, Rava brings a few different challenges, and he's able to prove that, there are other incidents in Shas where there is a chayve lavin, and we do know that the marriage is technically valid. So basically Rav is able to Rav is able to refute what Rav said, so that must not be the reason why a kohen can't marry a woman whose husband passed away through erison. So the question remains, what's the reason why a kohen can't? So then we suggest a few things. Either you could say maybe there is a los aseh and an aseh when it comes to erison, the aseh being kedoshin tiyu, but then we reject that. We say, well, kedoshin tiyu, if that's the case, then every case throughout Shas is also a los aseh and aseh. It's too vague. So then we bring another attempt. We say maybe it's a gezerah to prevent doing yibum on nisuin, right? Because if you do yibum on the erison, then maybe that's going to lead for you to do yibum on nisuin. It's too close. That's rejected just because there are too many incidents where we are too afraid of, there are many incidents where we could be technically be confused, but we don't hold that, we don't withhold in one thing because we're worried about confusion. Another thing when it comes to yibum, and then we pretty much end up saying it's a gezerah to prevent doing bia shnia accidentally. There are certain cases, like let's say if your yivama is a mamzer, you're allowed to do bia rishona just to qualify for yibum, but you're not allowed to continue to be with this woman. So that's one of the reasons why there's a gezerah here that the kohen can't marry in erison to prevent that sort of union. So that concludes Yevamos Daf Chaf, and we keep plugging along tomorrow with Yevamos Daf Chaf Aleph. Have a great day.